Hello, everybody. Welcome back to SEACPP, first meeting after spring break. Hope you guys had a nice, restful break. You guys don't know, SEACPP is the structural engineering club on campus. So all the professionals and everyone we bring in here is all structural focused. And if you really want to, learn more about the structural field, this is the club to go to. So yeah. Um, First announcement as always is membership. This year, membership is completely free. Um, and yeah, most of you guys probably know this by now since we are 3 meetings out of the final meeting. And with our membership, you get access to our t-shirt raffle, tech tours, job offers, and merch. So yeah. All right. As CCAP, we want to encourage you to join SEAOSC. SEAOSC is more of the national version of what our club is. It includes both industry professionals and students like me and many of us. And yeah, there are many resources that you can get from this organization. And one of those resources is the back to school event coming up tomorrow. And this event is completely free. All you have to do is register in a link. And if you don't want to go, it's completely free. There's no loss into it. But yeah, I really encourage you guys to go. The last of SEAOSC event I went to was the Beirut Blast event, and that was honestly a very good talk, and I learned a lot from it. So yeah, come out if you can. All right. Now into the important stuff. Okay. So so we're almost at the end of this school year. So elections are going to be starting. Election process starting today. Sorry, I put the wrong date up there. It should be the 13th. But pretty much today, we're going to have signups and voting. The link should come into, I'll put the link in the chat later. But you're going to see an interest form, and if you're interested in becoming a cabinet member, just sign that form, and there'll be requirements as well. And next week we'll have election talks. So that means if you signed up to be an officer, then you'd have to give a speech on why you want to be an officer, and we'll vote on that day. And then we'll reveal the results on the last meeting. So yeah. So some requirements to be eligible to sign up for a board position is you have to attend 2+ meetings unless you're e-council rep, because the e-council rep has his meetings during our meetings, so it's quite impossible for him. You guys will learn that later. But yeah, you have to be a SEAOSC member, and you have to fill out the form before next meeting, which is April 27th. As I said, you'll give a speech next meeting, and you will not be accepted to be on the board if you do not meet these requirements. So yeah, if you have any questions about this, just email me at seacap.prez, or just text the group me or Discord. All right. So now we're gonna go over just these board positions and what we do. So I'm gonna pass the mic to myself first. So as president, some things I do is coordinate and assist all board positions. So that means all the things that you see later on from all my board members, I have to be able to oversee and take part in that. So for example, the treasurer does reimbursement requests. I would have to also sign off on that and even help him with that. So yeah, I oversee everything. I ensure everything is ASI and e-council compliant. There's a lot of papers and rules that clubs have to follow. I have to make sure our club follows it. And lastly, I'm the representative for Cal Poly's SEAOSC student chapter. So that means I have to attend these meetings where a lot of the other student chapters come, such as SLO, UCLA, and Fullerton. And there we'll decide student SEAOSC events, such as the Skanska Tech Tour that we had a while back. All right, next, would my vice president want to talk about her position a little bit?
I apologize in advance for the echo. It's it's my service laptop. Okay, so the role for the vice president is to help assist. The main purpose is to help assist the president with their duties. Say if they are absent and they need someone to take their spot, the vice president will be there to take lead on the meeting. So if we go back to campus, not I'd, but whoever runs for vice president, they have to make sure they can also fulfill that role. But the main role for vice president is you have to make sure that you can network. And when I say network, be able to talk through email or through phone to other structural companies. And what the vice president does is you set up meetings so that you can get like guest speakers. Like today we have a guest speaker from DCI Engineering. You have to be able to contact companies from other structural businesses, and you have to recruit them into our club. And that's what we do for every meeting. And also by networking, you also have to make sure that you maintain the relationships with the representatives. And the last task for the vice president is you have to look out for technical tours. So like what Peter said, there was a Skanska tour. We've also done other tech tours with other companies as well, but this is virtual. But like when we go to campus though, you'd have to do like a lot more planning, like with the secretary and so forth.
All right, next we have our secretary.
Hi, you guys. I'm Yasmin, your SEACPP secretary. So basically for secretary, what you generally do, or what I do, is I take notes during our meetings, whether it be general or office meetings, because I send out all the emails. And what I typically do is I send out the SEACPP recap. I hope you guys see that. And I send out reminders for general meetings. I also send out emails about SEAOSC and all those kind of things. I'm supposed to be booking rooms, but due to COVID, we don't do that. Probably maybe next year, but that's what you're supposed to do as a secretary. I think that's pretty much it. Some people usually email me first just because they have my email on hand, but then I can refer to you and answer your questions as needed. That's it.
Awesome. Next up, we got our treasurer.
Hello, my name is Brandon, and some of the duties that treasurer has is it handles the finances of the club, which includes like membership, food, etc. We also have to submit disbursement requests to ASI, and we send out / distribute prizes, giveaways, and merch. And lastly, we submit a budget request form at the end of the year to ASI.
All right, awesome. Next, we have our event coordinator.
So event coordinator, this year we just planned a lot of club socials and collaborate with other clubs. So we did KIEP versus SEACPP, an event like that. But hopefully next year when we go back in person, event coordinator will hopefully be able to coordinate fundraisers to raise money for our club.
All right, awesome. And e-council rep, what do we do?
Hello, everyone. I'm this club's elusive e-council rep. And that's because due to scheduling, the e-council meeting is at the exact same time as our weekly meetings, but because of spring break, things got shifted a bit. So I'll be like attending all the future meetings for this semester. So the jobs of e-council rep, it's mainly, of course, to attend the engineering student council meetings, which are every other week. And at those meetings, you're supposed to take note of what the e-council gives us. So anything that like ASI or the College of Engineering has for us, I need to make sure that I relay that to our board members to make sure that we're compliant and that we have news on all the upcoming events. And then it's also vice versa, to where there's a section during the e-council meeting where all the club representatives can relay any upcoming meetings, events, anything like that to the engineering council, so they can like help us advertise any upcoming events that we may have.
All right, awesome. And I think last but not least, Webmaster, what do you do?
Hi everyone, I'm the Webmaster, and I'm pretty much just in charge of managing like the social media accounts. So our Facebook, Instagram, we have a WordPress, which is just our website. and our YouTube channel, SEACPP Recap. So right now I'm the one recording the meeting. Yeah, on those social media accounts, I just promote the events. The day before meetings, I post little pictures saying that we're having a meeting with who's gonna be talking if we have a guest speaker or some other information that we're gonna talk about. And sometimes I manage event signups and create forms for things like that.
All right, awesome. So yeah, if you're interested in any of those positions, just sign the entrance form. You can run for 2 positions, primary and secondary. Obviously, the primary will be more significant. But yeah, if you're interested, sign up. If you have any questions, email seacap.prez. I also encourage you to follow our social media here on the screen. But without further ado, Jazz, would you like to introduce our guest speaker?
Yes. Today we have a guest speaker from DCI Engineering, and his name is Matthew. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thanks, Jocelyn. Let's start. Let me share my screen. And yeah, thanks again for inviting me here. I'm actually a Cal Poly Pomona alumni, so great to be here and kind of see kind of going back to the alumni school and giving back to the students where I was too. So really
that's funny
that.
because I was just about to ask if you were an alumni, because usually they send CPP graduates to our meetings. Yes, because you can relate and to the students.
Yeah, and the whole industry perspective from once you graduate and looking back is like, okay, I see it different perspective now, and I can get into that, kind of like the differences between Cal Polys and UCs and all that stuff. So, but can you guys see my screen? Awesome. Okay, so I will start the presentation. All right, yeah, so I'm Matt Picardle. I'm Cal Poly Pomona alumni, and I work at DCI Engineers, and I'll just be going through our agenda, basically what structural engineering is, how I got into structural engineering, the career path in structural engineering, and a little bit about DCI, a little bit about me and my career path, and also DCI markets and services. So what is structural engineering? I know you guys majored in structural engineering or probably going into it, or at least have a large interest in it. So even for me, when I was still a student, I still didn't know what structural engineering was. So this is how I can break it down into simple terms. So structural engineering is basically like a human body. You'll have the architect, which is basically going to give you the overall vision of the building or the human body, what its shape is, what its functions are, the overall vision and how it looks and the aesthetics of it. So that's what the architect does. And you also have other disciplines. It's not just the architect that goes into the building. You'll be working with a lot of different disciplines. So for example, you have the mechanical engineers, which are equivalent to the cardiovascular system of the building. You have your air conditioning pipes, you have your ventilation pipes, similar to the human body, essentially putting good air in and taking bad air out. And in the human body, you'll also have the circulatory system. And in the building, it's the same thing. You'll be working with plumbing engineers. They have all those plumbing pipes that take bad water out and good water in. Then you'll be working with electrical engineers also. This is, I'm sure you've seen this at the engineering building, all those conduit pipes along the hallways. This is the electrical engineers. They're getting all of that throughout the building so the building can function and all those signals in, which is similar to our nervous system in the human body. And then you have the structural engineers, which is what I do. This is the skeletal system. This is the muscular system of the building, of the body. And you can easily tell whenever they're doing construction. So whenever they're building a building first, they're gonna do the skeleton first. So that's for a wood house, that's the wood members, that's the wood studs, wood trusses, that's the skeleton of the building. For a steel building, you have the steel members, the steel braces. Concrete building, the same thing, the concrete, the rebar, the foundations of the building. We designed the building so it stands up through its own weight, or if it goes through an earthquake or wind events, that building's still going to be able to take that force and still be standing. So how and why did I get into structural engineering? It wasn't something that I always wanted to do, but I was something really interested in. I think it was during my third year at Cal Poly Pomona, civil engineering general major. I was interested in structural, but it was kind of, I wasn't too good at it. Like, I think I got a C in my statics class, and same thing in structural materials, which is like the most, you need that stuff for anyone that's going into structural engineering. Static, strength of materials, I use those every day, and I barely passed those classes. So I was having a confidence issue. So something I was interested in, but I wasn't doing too well in. Even my math classes, I think I failed some math classes. So I liked it, but I wasn't good at it. I even went into like a demoralizing stage where I went to go see one of my professors for office hours. I was being lazy. I didn't prepare for those office hours. And it kind of came back to haunt me, because I would ask him a question. I would be sitting in his office and he was asking me a question like, okay, now what? And then I didn't study. So I was like, I don't know. And then I'd stand there for about a minute, and it really sucked. It was really awkward. And then that went back and forth for about 15 minutes. And I was just feeling stupider and stupider each time he would ask me a question. And he essentially lost his patience, where it got to the point where he just lost it. He got his pencil case and just chucked it on the ground, and like, how do you not know this? You should know this. And that was really demoralizing on my part, because if you want to get through that's like the worst thing you can tell an engineering student. So going through that was really embarrassing. What was even worse was when I walked out of the office, I noticed that his office hour door was open, and there was like a line of students going throughout the hallway and wrapping around, and everyone heard that. So I had to do my walk of shame too. So at that point, that was kind of like my do or die point, where I basically went to myself and said, okay, I need to improve my study habits, get back to the basics. So I had to study all that stuff on, because I still wanted to do structural engineering, improve my study habits, got to learn the basics, statics, dynamics, and some of those math classes too. But I was still having issues, even when I was doing those design classes. This was during the time of my senior projects, and I was doing an AE studio, working with architect students on a project. And I was struggling, and I was overcomplicating things. That was my problem. I would overcomplicate things. I would see a building, and I would see this picture in the middle where thousands of pieces together. How do you even get started on this? And it was actually Professor Gershfeld that kind of opened the matrix for me. He saw me struggling, and then he basically showed me that everything in structures is complicated, yes, but that's the whole thing about knowing your statics. That's why it's so important, getting back to the basics. Like, if you start off in this complicated model in the middle, it's too complicated. Your mind's not going to process it. But if you realize that all skyscrapers or tall towers are just cantilevers, that's something that you can grasp. It's just, you're going to have a lot of moment at the bottom, a lot of forces at the bottom foundation. But it's essentially just dragging all those forces all the way to the ground, and you'll have a force from the wind or earthquake or whatever. And that really opened my eyes, because now I could grasp it. I could understand the concepts of it, kind of like seeing the matrix. And I would see that everywhere. Same thing with bridges. Super complicated bridge. How do they even do this? But if you simplify it, it's just the moment diagram for a continuous beam. And then you'll start seeing this every day whenever you're seeing a bridge. Oh, it's following the moment diagram. And that's what it is. I mean, it's engineering at work. It's not just coincidence. It's engineering. And that's when it started really opening up my eyes. Same thing with like the Burj Khalifa, one of the tallest building, and I think still the tallest building now. What is the structural system for that? It's got to be super complicated. Yes, it is, but you can even simplify it too. It's a buttress core system. What shear wall core system? What is that? It's essentially this picture in the middle where there's wind blowing against the umbrella, and that person isn't falling down because they're bracing themselves with their leg. That's what essentially it is. It's a core. You have the core in the middle, and then you have braces bracing that core. So even things like that, it just really opened my eyes to see that was like the last push, like, okay, this is what I wanted to do. I like designing. I can understand the concepts now. So I got into it for how simple it can be, but I stayed into it because of how much stuff there is to learn. Like, yes, it's simple like this. Obviously, we don't design buildings as simple as that. But once you start that building block, that's your foundation. Okay, it's this simple. So how do we make it more and more complicated? Or how do we make it more and more intricate so that we're comfortable with the building design? So that's how I got into it. And that's why I chose this field. And, you know, as a professional, I've been in the profession for 6 years now. And it's been really cool. Because that's what I thought structural engineering was, designing. And yes, it's designing, but once you actually study the profession more, it's like, this is one of the most, I say it's a really important profession, and it's a lot of responsibility because it's a lot of the stuff we take for granted. You know, once you go to the third world countries or see those natural disasters that have earthquakes and they don't have structural engineers designing their buildings, entire cities like collapse. Like, imagine how many lives are lost, how many jobs are collapsed. Even like just looking back in COVID, none of our buildings got destroyed, but you can just see the economic impact of that. But imagine a whole city being completely ravaged by an earthquake or a tsunami. And a lot of that stuff can be prevented with structural engineering, with having safe buildings. Even during emergencies, hospitals need to be operational during whatever natural event. Structural engineers need to make that happen. Those hospitals need to be there to protect people, to save people during emergencies. So just really seeing that this is a profession that has impact, that the work is important, that there is a lot of responsibility, but there's a lot of reward too. What I enjoyed about it too was the impact. Some of these buildings I know that are going to be standing up for 50, maybe even 100 years, and seeing people that are enjoying those buildings. I mean, sometimes they're people's homes. There's people's livelihoods when you're doing like an office building. That's where people work. That's where they get their livelihood from. And knowing that you're a part of that you're keeping them safe during whatever earthquake, and knowing how important this profession is, being part of the built environment, that's what's really made me stay. And that's what got me really passionate about structural engineering. And yeah, that's why it's given me so much. And that's why I like giving back. I like talking about structural engineering, what this profession has done for me, and the importance of it. So let's go into some of the career path options. So a lot of the time, structural engineers design buildings. You're design consulting. This is when you're typically working for a private firm. This is what I do at DCI Engineers. Architects and developers hire the structural engineer, this design consulting firm, and then we help them design their building. But that's the most typical common path that you'll see people taking when they're thinking about becoming a structural engineer, designing buildings or designing bridges. But there's also a lot of other career paths that you can take. For example, you can get into the contractor builder side, where you're still doing design, but it's more of maybe the crane construction or the crane loads or lifting operations during the construction site. There is also specialty structural engineering, which is some of the items, like for example, when you're doing a residential house, you'll have like wood trusses. Those in the industry aren't typically designed by the design consulting engineer. That's more of a specialty, because there's firms like the specialty structural engineer that all they do are wood trusses. They got it down, they got the process down, they have the software, they have the procedures. They're really efficient at just doing that one thing, which is wood trusses. So there are firms out there that do similar stuff to that, like steel stairs is another specialty structural engineering field. You can also get into the public, which is working for the city or Department of Transportation. If you're talking about buildings, you get into the city, you'll mostly be doing a lot of plan checking, not so much designing, but you get paid more. It's a lot less stressful than the private side. So there's definitely perks for going into the public side. I know if you're going into bridges, Department of Transportation, I think you will be designing things. I don't do bridges, so that's kind of like another career path too, getting to the bridge design industry. The building and bridges are kind of separate industries in and of itself. You can also go into testing and inspection, or even the suppliers. A lot of the suppliers that do a lot of the nuts and bolts and the connections, they manufacture those, but they engineer those connections too, and they promote those connections too. So that's a good route if you're more of an extrovert, you like talking to people, you like traveling. Becoming the engineer for the supplier side, you get to work a lot with the engineering, but also you get to reach out to more people and travel. Recently, we have software engineering firms that do a lot of programming. This is good if you're really into programming. This is one field that you can get into because structural engineers use a lot of software. And if you can get into one of those firms, you can kind of use the best of both worlds. And it's also a good profession because you can transition a lot into different things. Like, for example, out of the discipline, you can get into the real estate or the developer side. Developers hire their own, sometimes structural engineers, as like kind of like a back check to make sure everything's going correctly. So you'd be back checking like the structural engineer that they hired to make sure everything's efficient. But that's one way to get out of your discipline, and that makes a lot of money. Obviously, the developers, real estate, you can use your experience that you gain in structural engineering to go to that side. You'll do less design, but you'll use that experience that you built up throughout your career path. So some of the transitions that you experience from college to career. So the similarities, you'll absolutely be using statics, strength of materials, all of your design classes at Cal Poly Pomona. Those are all really applicable. You'll be doing less of like those, the moment transfers, moment distributions by hand. Those are kind of outdated. You'll be using software for that, but it always comes back to the question, how do you know the software is correct? So that's why I say you always need to go back to the statics, because when I ask new engineers like, okay, great, you modeled it, how do you know it's right? If you say you don't know, that's kind of the worst answer that you can do, because we're not hiring a technician, we're hiring an engineer to, hey, how do you know that software is right? Because eventually someone's going to be standing on it and someone needs to put their career on the line to stamp that thing. And you as an engineer should know the basics. Like, for example, if you're designing a truss, you should know that, okay, if it's pinned, all the members should be in axial or tension, and you should know that the top chords in compression, bottom chords in tension. Seeing the behavior of structures and knowing how structures are going to behave, I think that becomes a lot more important than knowing these outdated methods of like finding the shear and moment diagram of a portal frame method or cantilever method. Those, yeah, because we have software, we got software to do those tedious tasks, but you should know as an engineer where to expect the moments, where to expect the shears. Is the structure behaving or deforming correctly? That's how you back check that software. And that's more of a skill now than it ever is before, because you'll be working a lot with software and you can't rely on it a lot of the times. But what good thing about Cal Poly Pomona is that you get exposed to the codes. I went to UC system for my master's, and yeah, there's a big difference. I think I took for granted Cal Poly Pomona's education system in terms of the practicalness. Yeah, there's a lot of people that that aren't exposed to the building codes or even the constructability aspects, which is great for the industry and something the industry really appreciates. So you'll still be learning about those, and you'll be learning more about the construction and business aspects too, because if you miss something, for example, on the structural drawings, it may not be a big deal at school, but if you miss it during construction, you can cost those mistakes are costly. I remember catching like, hey, how come we're not showing this piece of metal or this hold down? And we had a lot of those throughout the project, and that cost like $30,000. I was like, oh yeah, that's a lot of money. That's a car right there. So things like that, knowing that, yeah, our stuff is expensive and you got to take accountability for it. But that's why we got insurance. People make mistakes. You're not going to be perfect, especially if you're new. You're not going to know anything. It's expected. So obviously, just ask. A lot of your employers should know that you're new, and hey, that's fine. Everyone was new, and we know how daunting it was to start working, and we'll be there to help you out. But typical first assignments, a lot of the requests for information when the drawings are out into the field, just so you know, that bigger picture, as structural engineers, we're not paid to do our calculations. Like our end product are the blueprints, the structural blueprints or the drawings, and the structural calculations. No one looks at those, only like the plan checker for the city. But like the main thing is that the most important legal thing are our drawings. So that's what we're paid for as structural engineers for our drawings. So once those blueprints are out in the field, the contractors, the constructors will be asking a lot of questions about the drawings as they're building it. So they'll be asking questions or RFIs, requests for information about your drawings. Like, hey, we encountered this in the field. Can we drill through your wall because we have a conduit going through or a pipe? Or this wasn't clear on your drawings. Can you clarify? So a lot of those things will be your first assignments, verifying designs, going out into the field and seeing what's actually built. That's something that we like to do with a lot of the engineers, because it's always great to actually see what's being built. Constructability is a big thing. And reviewing submittals too. Submittals are, we have our blueprints. For example, we're doing a steel building. We have the blueprints for that, but someone needs to fabricate it. That goes to the fabricator, and they're going to be detailing every single nut and bolt of the project. And one thing that you might do as a structural engineer is review those drawings, like that goes over every nut and bolt, making sure that the fabricators are interpreting our drawings correctly. So when they press that fabricate button, all the steel pieces come out nice and are flush and it's buildable and it goes out like a Lego set. That's the best case scenario. You also have tenant improvements. We call those TIs. Those are like small projects. Like, let's say if you're renovating your house and you want to hang like a chandelier off of your roof, will your trust members, will your roof members be able to take that? So things like that, doing some renovations, we also call them tenant improvement or TIs. And you'll also be doing a lot of modeling, like I mentioned before. So you'll be doing a lot of structural modeling. Don't worry about the software. Once you learn one, you can learn all of them. Like if you learn SAP 2000, you learn ETABS. Software is the software. I think a lot of students focus too much on what software should I learn? What software should I learn? It doesn't matter. Like, we've never not hired anyone because they don't know one software. Once you learn one software, you can learn them all. What's important is knowing the basics of the software, statics, what it's doing, finite element analysis, stuff like that. So don't worry too much about it. Once you learn one, you learn them all. And quick thing is, like, DCI, we're mostly structural, but we also do some civil engineering work. So if you're interested in civil, which probably not, we do those too. And looking at a company, this is very important too. So what I encourage younger engineers to do is try to work for a smaller company or smaller to mid-size, because you get to learn everything. I know there's those huge companies that are large and everybody knows about them, which is great, but there's a better chance that you'll get pigeonholed into something because they're so large. They're more assembly line because they got to produce so much output. You might be stuck like designing steel beams 24/7, and that's all you do. And if that's what you want to do, great. But I think if you're anything like me and you want to learn the whole design process, you start with a small to medium-sized firm, because that's where you do everything. Those small to medium-sized firms don't have all the resources, so you're going to be doing a lot of the work, and which is very cool, I think, at the beginning of your career, because once you can work on a building from conception or schematic design to the design process, the construction phase, getting it through all the way until it's built, you know the whole design process. Once you know all that, it brings up your confidence as a professional, as a structural engineer, that you can go anywhere now because you know the whole design process, you know how it works. You can go later on in your career to those larger firms if you want, if that's something that you want to do, or you have the confidence to even start your own firm because you know how everything works. Once you know how everything works, your options open up because you have so much experience. So that's what I recommend. DCI, I'd say we're a mid to large size company, but our offices are pretty small, at least in the SoCal offices. Like our SoCal, our LA, Irvine, and San Diego offices, they're all less than 20 people. So it's a smaller office for sure, but we get to work with all different types of projects and that. I also want to mention work-life balance. This is getting a lot better in the industry. I think before, when I got in there was And there still might be some firms that have like a reputation of 60-hour weeks as a regular. And I've heard some like stories of past engineers, like they'd go home at 6 and their employees would like look at them where it's like, hey, it's only 6 p.m. Why are you going home? It's not 10 p.m. yet. Like it was looked down upon to leave early. So there still may be some firms out there like that, but just be aware that those exist, and go talk to an employee over there. Easy to look to reach out via LinkedIn to kind of see what the culture's like, because it's going to be different. And I think that's where a lot of structural engineers get a bad experience when they work for those types of companies, because yeah, you'll learn a lot, but you'll get burnt out really quick, and you'll probably blame it on the profession instead of like blaming the company and the work culture over there. So something to be aware of. One of the things for me is that I really enjoyed, like, they treat me like a professional. If I have something to do, or if there's a family member in need, it's like, yeah, go take the day off, or go, we trust you, you'll get your work done. It doesn't need to be like 9 to 5 exactly. It's like they'll treat you like a professional, and they try to help you out whenever you get overloaded. So that's one of the things that I really appreciated. And more about the culture here at DCI. It's good if you're a self-starter. Of course, we'll support you and get you trained up. But later on in your career, if you want to get into project management, that's a great career path here at DCI. Just because if you want to get into a specific market such as mass timber, modular, great. The company will definitely support you 110%, but it's on you. You get what you put into it. If you don't put any effort into it, well, you're probably not going to get a lot. But if you're passionate about something and you want to explore it, go for it. We'll support you getting your classes, or getting into the network of that industry, what industries you can join, and they'll help pay for that too, your education on subjects that you're really interested in. And yeah, a lot of people, I don't know, it's like a thing with engineers. They all like to go hiking and camping and all that stuff, which is really cool. And that's something I appreciate. I went on my first backpacking trip, I think last year, like real backpacking. I didn't know it was real backpacking. Like you get a backpack and you just go up into the mountains and isolate. So that was a really cool trip. And that's one of the things that we like to do a lot at DCI Engineers. And just to give you an overall picture, we do have 300 employees, and they're all spread across the 13 offices. And here you can see a lot better. So San Francisco, LA, Irvine, San Diego, that's our California offices. We work a lot together. But our main office is in Seattle. I think we have 100 employees over there. And the rest of it, we're all spread out, even going as far east as Austin and Denver. And we're very diversified during this pandemic. That really helped out when like the hotel industry got hurt because of the pandemic. Yeah, we lost some work, but we were spread out enough in these different markets that, we didn't have to lay anybody off. So that was the good thing about being in like this diverse company, because even as a professional, you get to work on all sorts of projects. So no one project, even though it's similar, it's never the same. That's something that I really appreciated. I'm always learning something new. And these are some of our civil projects in case you're interested in civil. But we also do a lot of high rises. And a lot of these things, yeah, we have a lot of these. And we also do performance-based design. If you don't know what that is, it's basically, you have your ELF procedure, your basic procedures, but we also get into these complicated nonlinear time history analysis. It's basically a fancy, expensive analysis for these towers. And that's something that we do as a firm too. I haven't gone into it, but it seems pretty cool. I get to see what they're doing, and it's really interesting how complicated it can get in that whole process. But we're also big in sustainability too. I think this Billet Center building, I think it was one of the first of its kind, essentially in terms of like energy output and its environment. This thing is like net zero, so it basically puts more like energy in than it generates more energy than it needs. So it's not really doing anything in terms of like environmental damage. So things like that we're really into as well. We don't do too many bridges here in SoCal, but up in the like Montana and stuff, our offices over there they do a lot of bridge work. Add more of the civil stuff that I'll skip over. A little bit about myself. Yeah, I'm a project manager at DCI, still doing structural engineering. So I graduated 2012 Cal Poly Pomona, got my master's at UC San Diego after that in structural engineering. And yeah, throughout this profession, I really enjoyed it and I wanted to share more of it. So I became host of the Structural Engineering Channel podcast, made my own YouTube channel, and it's basically talking about structural engineering in terms of career paths and what my day's like, because that was something that I always wanted to know when I was a student. As a student, I would Google like, hey, what is it like to be a structural engineer? I'd go into Reddit where everyone hates their lives, and it was like, oh, that's pretty depressing. And I noticed that a lot of the people that really like their careers weren't sharing on the internet. So this is why I started that YouTube channel. If you want to know what a structural engineer is like and the lessons I've learned throughout, I definitely recommend checking that out. And yeah, some of my projects, Santa Clara Retail Square. This is the first project that I've actually managed, designed, and went through from all the way schematic to the beginning of the project, all the way to construction. So this was really cool because that's where I got to see the whole process. It's like my first project seeing complete. And the other cool thing about why this project meant a lot to me was like my brother and my niece live up there in Santa Clara. And so when it got built, they were going to the Whole Foods market a lot. And it was really cool to see that, hey, I impacted their environment and like in a positive way, like something that I've designed like pretty much on paper all the way through like the computer programs, through construction, all those hours spent, it was worth it because my family gets to enjoy it. So some of those things, I think that's one of the best feelings that you can get once your buildings get built. Seeing people use it, and even better if your family uses it. Another one that's under construction right now, Christ our Savior Catholic Parish. This is what another steel building with steel trusses. This was interesting. It's really custom, like custom trusses, step roof, complicated framing. Really interesting project. I didn't work on this one, but this is like one of our landmark projects. This is the Grand Avenue Parcel Q. If you guys are familiar with the Disney Concert Hall in LA, you know, that whole curvy building that looks like a crumpled up piece of paper. That one, the architect for that is Frank Gehry, and he's doing the building right next door to it. So it's another Frank Gehry building right across from the Disney Concert Hall. And this one's actually almost done. This one was really complicated too, especially with Frank Gehry and his like complicated architecture. That's another one that's coming up, and that's something that we worked on and we're giving presentations about. Really interesting to see how complicated that was. So student tips. So like the best tips that I can give you when like looking for a job is get your internships first. If you don't have internships, it's really tough. Like if you just graduate and you don't have any internships, because we got done reviewing resumes like for interns, and once you're getting like hundreds of resumes, like it's really easy to just like parse out all the students that don't have internships, because so many of them have internships, and if you don't have one, it's not going to help. And if you can't get your first internship, reach out to those smaller companies. Don't forget about the smaller companies, because the way it works is you have those large companies that you hear about, like your AEComs, your Jacobs, the ones that have thousands of engineers, and you know about them because they pay for essentially like publicity. They pay for advertisements. So of course you're going to know about them, but everyone else is too. They're going to have like thousands of applicants. And no matter how good your resume is, your chances are still going to be low. It's kind of just like a numbers game at that point. Absolutely try for those, but don't put all of your eggs in those because everyone is applying to those. You have to reach out to those medium and smaller size companies that you don't know about. You're going to have to go find them because they're not small, they're not big enough to put an ad out like a job posting. That takes time, effort, and money on their part. So you're actually doing them a favor if you go find them and reach out to them. Hey, do you need help or an internship for the summer? And you're gonna have to do Google research. Like for me, that's how I got my first internships. Like Googling local structural engineering firms, and they don't have job postings. They're not. You're going to have to reach out directly to the CEO or the principal because they don't have time for that. And what's cool about that is you're going to be the only one for that position because you took the effort to reach out, do research on them, and reach out directly to them. Like if you go in their shoes, they're so busy with their own projects, they don't have time to go to a job posting, but they're in the back of their head like, oh man, I could really use some help with this non-tedious stuff or this tedious stuff, but just don't have time to put up that job posting. And then you come in and volunteer your time to be an intern or whatnot, and you'll be the only applicant because they don't have, you're basically making that job for them. So that's the strategy that I used as a civil engineering student having trouble. And what also helped was, applying to these leadership positions like SEACPP. Like I know at the beginning they were talking about officers. That definitely helped because I couldn't get internships. And if you're just a student that goes home and studies, like that's the absolute bare minimum you can do as a student. That's what I did. And I wasn't getting any internship callbacks, of course, because that's the bare minimum. Who wants to hire someone that does the bare minimum, even if your GPA is pretty good? So it wasn't until I started getting involved in these organizations like SEACPP, I was part of the GeoWall team, I was part of the ERI seismic design competition. That actually shows that, hey, you have leadership potential and that you're passionate about your career. So definitely look into researching those smaller companies, getting involved to boost your resume. And guys, use LinkedIn. Like it's so easy to ask anyone. Go on the alumni network of Cal Poly Pomona, go stalk or LinkedIn stalk someone that like recently graduated at a firm that you want to get into, and just ask them what it's like. It's called like an informational interview where you're not asking for a job. You're just like, hey, I know you graduated a few years ago and you're in the structural engineering field. Like, do you have any advice for me to get in, or what the industry is even like? And a lot of alumni are willing to like give you 15 minutes of their time, especially now, everyone's on Zoom. Like anyone can do like a 15-minute Zoom call. So it's really easy to just reach out, and a lot of people want to help you get into the industry and whatnot. So definitely leverage LinkedIn. That's how you use LinkedIn. You actually get on the phone with them and have a 15-minute interview. They may even like you or refer you to other firms that you're trying to get into that you're not going to find anywhere else because you're not part of the industry. They are. And that's all you need. All you need is that one opportunity, that one chance to get there. And I think that's one of the best things, because always the best thing is networking. That's what I learned later on in my career. Like you can't replace that. But if not, I sucked. And that's what I had to do. I had to reach out for the smaller firms. So that was my method. But now this other method, I would have gotten more involved in these careers and like talk to professionals, because that's really what's going to set you apart. Because everyone's a resume until you like see their face. And people that are hiring are all human. And if you can just get in front of them like in a career fair, that's going to speak volumes. So that's the best career advice I can give. And if you want to reach out, feel free to email me at mpicardo@dci-engineers.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn or go to my YouTube channel. Probably the best way is through email or messaging me through LinkedIn. So thanks a lot.
All right. I think we'll open up this time for Q&A for the last 7 minutes. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or even just type it in the chat.
I just had a quick question. So I know that you said you made your YouTube channel because like, oh, there's no one really talking about all the experience stuff online. So like, how did you come up with like all the ideas for like your various videos?
Coming up with the various videos, a lot of it was, well, I saw it in a different industry. Like I saw other YouTubers, like in the software industry. I mean, I just reverse engineer it. I mean, that was as an engineer, I was like, okay, well, how do you get views? Or how do you make videos? What videos do I talk about? And finding an industry where this already works and it gets promotion, like the software engineering industry, computer science, they have a lot of successful YouTube videos up. And for me, that was my starting point. Like, can I do anything similar to that? And 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 yeah, learning about marketing, learning about entertainment, learning about YouTube as a client, like from a business perspective, YouTube is a client. And if you work with YouTube, it'll help you out. So learning about that stuff, learning about human psychology, marketing, what people want. Yeah, I studied marketing, studied YouTube, and no one's really willing to do that in the structural engineering industry. Like, well, at least when I looked, like I was at a conference once and they were just saying like, yeah, you guys should study marketing because you guys are complaining about not being recognized and whatnot. And like just looking around, like, shit, no one's gonna do this. So it had to be me. I think for me, it felt like my responsibility to, if anyone's gonna do it, it's gonna be me. And because at least for me, I was open-minded enough to be like, yeah, it's working in other industries. It works. Why can't we do it in the structural engineering industry? So for me, that's kind of where I got my ideas and seeing a successful model, just reverse engineering it.
I know you mentioned reaching out to smaller firms. Yeah, within your talk, I was wondering which firms did you reach out to, and yeah, how'd you get there?
Reaching out to firms, what did I reach out to? Yeah, the way I started my search was like I applied to all of the way my job search was back then was I would apply to all of the major jobs, like the ones that you find on monster.com or whatnot, the ones that actually had job postings. So yeah, I would do all that, do my due diligence. But there was a whole bunch of other smaller firms that I had to look up. Like honestly, I just did a Google search, local structural engineering firms. And you'd find their website, barely a website. Like you'd find some 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 half-assed website that's barely complete, but it had the contact info of the principal. And uh, I did that for, I think I found like 30 or 40, I don't know, I'd say at minimum 30 companies, small companies that barely had a website and they didn't have job opportunities. Like sometimes they were even single man, like structural engineers. And yeah, I sent about like 30 cover letters, resumes, emails to those decision makers. That's important. Go straight to the decision maker. Don't go to HR. That's what sucks about big firms. You have to go through HR. But for those smaller and mid-size, go straight to the decision maker. And that's what I did. And it was actually a pretty good hit rate. Like I applied to like 30 and I got about 3 opportunities out of that, which is like really good. So and I'm not surprised because you're the only one applying to that. They don't have a position. You're making that position. So it's less prestigious, but you need to start somewhere. Like once you're like proven to like, okay, people can work with you in your first internship, it's a lot easier to get those other internships. I think I had like, I don't know, 3 or 4 internships, but it all started just getting that first one. Once you get that first one, it's a lot easier to get that second one. So.
I had a question. So, I mean, I have internship experience. Let's just say if someone did not have internship experience, but they are very knowledgeable in like software and you've been to Cal Poly, so you know what they teach us in school. And so like let's just say you're really good at like the software programs. Like, would that count towards experience or would that be like neglected?
If you're really technical but don't have internship experience, yeah, it counts for something. Like if you have good grades and you're really good at you actually have projects that shows that you went above and beyond and you're really good at that program or whatnot, for sure, showcase it. Like sometimes a firm might need those technical skills and they might value those technical skills. So yeah, for sure. It can definitely help, but it's going to be hard to stand out unless you either get in front of somebody and show them why it's important, or you can also apply for these leadership positions that show you're more than just, because if you're just technical, you're kind of one-dimensional. And if you're trying to stand out with technical, like everyone's technical, like you're an engineer, of course you're technical. But once you get into the industry, you'll realize like the engineers that do really well are the ones that are technical, but also have those communication skills, those leadership skills, those initiative, like go-getters or whatnot, that you kind of get, that those team player types that you get when you do these types of organizations like ASCE, SEACPP. Those are the things that build that character. And at least for our firm, that's what we look at too. Like, yeah, you're technical, that's great, but what else? Because it's hard. We can get, if we need technical people, we can just hire anybody. Like, yeah, you know statics, great. Like those are really easy to find. But if you really want to stand out, like you go to a career fair, you talk to that person, you reach out to them, that recruiter, and show them why you're different or why you stand out. I think that's one of the things that I think students sometimes get confused about, because yeah, like you can't, everyone's technical. It's like a bad strategy to try to stand out if you're technical, but it's a completely different strategy if you want to get out of your comfort zone and join these types of organizations and yeah, give a speech in front of the class or something like that. Like those are the types of things that you'll be doing anyways in the profession. If you can show that, it'll mean a lot.
All right, I'm gonna have to make that the last question. Thank you for speaking, Matt. It was really good.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, if there's any more questions, I'll drop his information in the chat later. But yeah, for right now, I need to run off to the exam, so I'll see everyone later.
Good
All right,
luck.
bye. Thanks, Matt.
See you, everyone.